whatever order you like, Laura. And I do apologise, Sophie, that you're not up there, but I'm going to start by inviting everybody to introduce themselves so people can put faces to names. So let's start with you, actually, Sophie.
I'm a CMO at MPB. We are the world's largest platform for buying and selling used photo and video kit. So relatively niche, although a large niche, but really heavily steeped in the circular economy.
Thanks, Sophie.
Hi everyone, my name's Irfan. I work at Media Hub. We're a creative media agency that sit within the Mullen Lowe Creative Group, but also part of IPG. I look after technology platforms and digital.
Hi everyone, I'm Ryan from Goodloop, and we are a platform that helps brands care about people and people care about brands.
Hello, and I'm Laura Wade. I'm Head of Sustainability at Essence, which is a media agency with a digital and data background.
Thank you very much. So, big topic, 30 minutes, no pressure. But let me start with a big question, I suppose. There's so many sort of different avenues that we could take this conversation down, but it struck me, particularly after speaking with all of you in preparation and also chatting with colleagues at ExchangeWire, that I think it would be useful for the audience if we begin the conversation from the perspective of why you think environmental sustainability needs to be important and up the top of the agenda in the marketing and advertising industry. I know that's a massive question, but a little bit of an individual perspective, since you're all coming at this topic from slightly different angles, and I think everyone in the audience needs to, have a picture painted as to where the industry needs to be focused when it comes to environmental sustainability. Let's start with you, Laura.
I think, following on from what Boris was just saying about innovation, the climate crisis and environmental impact is the biggest context that we are now operating in. It's going to shape everything that we do. It's impacting investors, it's impacting current employees, future employees, and it's impacting consumers. So I think it has to be inherent in every decision and every design and every product that we touch and shape as an industry.
And do you feel as though the industry has got a sort of firm eye on that agenda?
How many times was sustainability talked about yesterday?
Yes, very good question. Right, okay, good, excellent baseline. Ryan, what's your point of view?
Yeah, I think from our perspective, advertising is ultimately the fuel that kind of drives forward kind of modern society. So I think for our side, we see it as being something really important to have that as a clean path as we can. I think if we want to try and affect change on a meaningful level, people do listen to brands, people do care about those opinions. So for us to try and move that conversation forward, it's going to be vital. It's not an opt-in anymore, it's a hygiene factor. It's something that just has to happen. And so, certainly from the Goodloop side, our job is trying to make that as easy as possible. I'll try and not do a shameless plug just now, though.
Irfan, give us your point of view.
Yeah, we live in a £25 billion plus digital ecosystem here in the UK, and that creates massive opportunity for the whole ecosystem to really lean in and deliver much cleaner advertising. I think with a lot of these transitional points, you have the ad tech vendors that really lead the way, much like you guys have, and seen This Is of the world. And it really helps brands and agencies. It kind of props them up and gives them a step up, but it's obviously not enough, I think. We all have lots of power in order to clean up a lot of the inventory in our industry to drive CO2 emission savings. So there's a big opportunity there.
And Sophie, you're the marketer on the panel. Congratulations. I'm really interested in your point of view because, the follow-on from this is, so how do we take responsibility for driving forward environmental sustainability from an industry point of view? And we're all kind of coming at it from a different perspective. So give me your point of view from your experience of working for MPB, the type of brand that you are, and the way that you feel others in the industry should be addressing this.
So I think as an industry, we've obviously we're using energy, we're creating some of that carbon footprint, right? So we have and I think Ellen MacArthur quotes 55% of the carbon problem is energy usage, so we definitely need to look at our ecosystem to remove it. But the other 45% is consumption, right? It's the take, make, waste piece of, I'm in a circular brand, so of course I would say this, but we, as marketeers, we're driving over consumption, and we need to be responsible in how we're doing that. And I think lots of brands have been called out for coming with some environmental message, which actually is table stakes, where, you know, Google and Facebook have both said, I think, that they're carbon neutral or they're almost 100% renewable energy for their own businesses, but they are also responsible for all sorts of platform that allows other brands to drive over consumption or advertise, maybe cynically, greenwashing. So for me, it's both what we're consuming, but also what we are facilitating people to consume.
Really important point, and just quickly for the benefit of everyone in the audience, circular brand or a circular business is, please give me your definition.
So our belief is used is better than new, so no new products. We entirely circulate used kit. So circular fashion is taking clothing which already exists and reselling it. But I think there's a difference between a circular business and a circular business model. So our business model is circular. Every product that comes to us has had a past life and has a future life. But as a business, we still buy desks, we still use energy. So then the second part of that is us making sure that our desks are used when they come to us and they have a life plan, that our energy is renewable. We need to get to a place, right, where nothing is new, everything is circular on the planet. That's our only option. Sorry to doom monger. We're all doomed. But we do need to get to the place where circular is much bigger, and I think fashion's a really big part of that, and they're at single digits circularity in fast fashion, so that needs to move quite quickly.
And where does, sorry, I've got so many questions, but where does offsetting sit in that then? So if you operate a circular business model, but obviously you're still consuming and you're still generating carbon, is offsetting part of that, or is it considered a different tactic to address environmental sustainability?
So we've used offsetting in the past in order to, for places where we weren't circular, but our future plan is to be net zero, so that we are using renewable energy and things like that.
Great, okay. Laura and FN, I want to come to you for a bit of perspective on how you're approaching this from an agency point of view. Sophie's made a good point. Agencies are businesses in and of themselves and therefore potentially generators of carbon, but you're also representing such a wide range of brands and businesses. How do you tackle this, Laura?
Yeah, we're not potentially, we definitely are massive carbon footprint. It can become really complex and overwhelming. So at Essence, how we sort of simplify it is looking at it in three areas. So how we behave, so that's climate literacy and training our people and to understand climate literacy and the choices that we make on an operational level in terms of travel, the offices, etc. Our output. So our output is our media plans and the products that we create. And then thirdly, our influence on the industry, our influence on our clients. And so to give you an example in terms of our media output, we've committed to all media plans to be net zero by 2030. So that requires our whole supply chain to be net zero. And just to be super clear on the difference between net zero and carbon neutral, if that's okay. I'm not teaching people to suck eggs.
Please do. No.
Net zero means a reduction of 90% of your emissions, there and thereabouts, and only 10% or less residual emissions can be offset. So offsetting is not the solution, reduction is the solution, and that's why we need design and product developed that has reduction built into its core, not offsetting.
Huge challenge though, right, for an organisation like Essence?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a huge challenge for every sector. But this really matters. This is probably a defining moment in all our careers to do something that is genuinely going to ensure that we have a society that we can all be proud of in the next 8 years. So we've got brilliant minds, we've got brilliant creativity, we're inquisitive. We need to collaborate and solve this together. But we need to do that by asking questions and not treating it as a work stream or a side project or a one-off pitch to win one piece of business. We need to fundamentally change how we approach our work and the work that we deliver.
FN, what's your point of view from Media Hub?
Yeah, well, from a media perspective, we've got a approach which is fewer, cleaner, more effective inventory, essentially, that we bid for. Fewer in the sense that just targeting ads that are being seen and cutting the tail of ads that are not being seen. And it's quite frightening how long that tail is. Some of the work we've been doing with Lumen around auto-optimizing to eye gaze. And there is a sub-segment of inventory, it's very small, that result in people actually looking at the ads. And so we're kind of leaning in on that. And that saves data transfer and CO2 emissions by cutting the tail. Cleaner in terms of leaning into marketplaces, curated marketplaces. The GoodNet, for instance, they're doing some really good work in terms of helping create some of those, and using bidding algorithms to point our inventory towards those ethically progressive publishers and green publishers. And then the effective bit, I think, is the most important bit, because all of this is a real struggle when you're talking to most of our clients, which are very short-termism, and they like the idea and they have marketing goals around sustainability, but when it comes down to investment, they don't want to eat into their workable media. So what we're doing at the moment is testing the relationship between driving sustainability, but also that coexisting with effectiveness. And so what we find, for example, with the attention work we're doing, when we're optimizing to high attention, actually the price is a lot higher. So clients are like, well, it's costing more. But so I think what we're trying to do at the moment is just experiment test. And we're doing it across a small number of clients that are leaning into this at Media Hub. I could count them on one hand, but that's good enough in terms of a pilot.
It's a start, right? They need to start somewhere. Ryan, from your point of view, I mean, much of what FN's just said there, and it touches a little bit on what you've mentioned as well, Laura, is about sort of, producing a more efficient advertising experience, right? And we've been talking about that a lot all day yesterday. It's an enormous theme in the industry at the moment. Boris mentioned it as well, the idea of, simplifying this advertising supply chain. From your point of view, how do you think the technology side of the industry is doing at that? And do you think that there are technology vendors that are doing it not just from the point of view of thinking we need an efficient advertising value chain, but also actually this is really good for environmental sustainability too?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. I think it's been touched on before that the tenure of your average CMO is sort of at 12 to 18 months in major organizations. Generally speaking, they don't have the time to look on that sort of like 5-10 year timeline. So they've got to be looking at something much short term, which means that actually we have to make sustainability something which is positive for business. It's got to be something that's impactful. And what we find and what really kind of encourages me is that most of the things which makes your campaign more carbon friendly is actually just good practice generally. So that's shaving down file sizes so that they're a bit smaller means that they load faster, means that you end up with less wastage. Makes your budget stretch that a little bit further. I think it's been touched on just by Irfan. You've got companies like Seen This who are able to have sort of adaptive streaming technology instead of traditional sort of file downloads. So I think it's really interesting that there is these companies which are coming up with solutions which are carbon friendly, but that are actually also driving meaningful business outcomes. And I think it's important that we kind of don't lose sight of that fact. Otherwise, we end up being pushed back into the room with the tweed jackets where no one's really going to pay attention.
Go on, Laura.
Yeah, I think we don't want to call anything carbon friendly, let's be honest.
Nothing friendly about carbon.
I agree with the group. I think the way that we approach it, particularly working with people like Seen This, is and people like Scope 3 actually, is looking at data waste and data excess and how we strip that out. So supply path optimization, Essence has been built on data efficiency from day dot. So the fact that we, don't work with ad networks and we have a very clean, transparent supply chain enables us now to look at technology like Scope 3, which enables us to now see the emissions of a domain at creative level, at ad tech level, and operational level, which is a game changer for us, because then we can overlay that with the performance of a campaign and look for that sweet spot of domains that are not only delivering against the campaign KPIs, but are reducing our carbon footprint, and move away from those domains that are high in carbon and not efficient in terms of our campaign delivery. So this is all stuff that we are leaning into at the moment to sort of try and have an industry standard against in the future.
And tell me, has that sort of been, what has that process been like within Essence? Is it sort of, are you able to convince your colleagues that this is the best approach? Are you able to push back on decisions about perhaps, where advertising spend is directed, or various technology suppliers, and say, actually, no, we're not going to use these guys because they don't have, a good environmental sustainability approach? How has that gone?
I think, like Irfan said, I think the next 7 to 8 months is very much about experimentation and discovery and collaboration. I think, as an industry, we need to collaborate. This isn't, yes, there are elements of competitive advantage, but we need to solve this as a collective. We're not coming out and saying, can't work with them, don't do this. We're in the stage of discovery, and we want to collaborate with publishers, with ad tech, people, vendors, to explain what we're trying to achieve, i.e. net zero, and how can we all go on that journey and all achieve that. And something we need as an industry is a standardized method of calculation, measurement, and agreed value chain sort of remit, and work towards reducing that as a collective.
That sounds critical. I want to touch on that in a bit more detail in a second. But Sophie, I just want to come back to you over there, listening to the rest of the panellists talk about the ways in which they're influencing their own businesses and trying to therefore have an impact on the industry. From a marketer's point of view, I know it's a bit tricky because you are working within a brand that already has got this at the core of the way they operate. Like you said, it's you operate a circular product, and so you're marketing that to an audience that is probably already bought into that. But with your marketer's hat on, and perhaps amongst other marketer colleagues who are involved in environmental sustainability groups, is this compelling? Do you find that other marketers are making decisions about their advertising capabilities based on the environmental sustainability creds of the organisations they're working with?
That is a very short answer. I would say no.
Yeah, okay.
I think as a marketer, it's really tough because, as we all know, it's like everybody's already in a swamped role. And it is I think Laura, you just said, right, this is a very complex area. I work in a brand which has been circular for a decade. It's entirely our brand purpose, and I have a head of sustainability in my team. And that's still an enormous ask for me to understand exactly what it is that we're doing, what we're messaging, and what we need to do in order to improve things for the future. Lots of brands don't have any of those resources and don't have any of those reasons to be focused on it. So I think understanding for marketeers is really poor, and I think understanding for consumers is really poor. And so then if consumers aren't asking for it or aren't willing to pay for it, I think cynically there is an awful lot of greenwashing that's happening. People know they have to have a sustainability messaging, so they say, our bottles are recycled or whatever it is that they want to say. I don't think anybody understands it. And everything I look at, I mean, maybe it is cynical, but everything I look at, I think that's probably a nonsense, or it doesn't really help anything. It's just a statement. But I don't think the consumer understands it anyway. So I think everybody's just in a world of, well, we ticked a box and we moved on. So I would be surprised if lots of people were making decisions based on this as a big part of it.
Okay, so this is making me feel rather depressed. Let's think about some but it's very important conversation, right? So, we've all agreed that in one way or another we need to be influencing not just, our own organisations, but others within the industry to think about this differently. Where do we start? You've mentioned education, you've mentioned the importance of measurements across the industry, but where do we start? I'd like to hear a point of view from everyone on that.
I think what we need to realise is it's not a trend. So in the UK government have legally enshrined that we will see a carbon reduction by 78% by 2035. Now that feels like miles off, but the fact is...
It's not really,
and we need to do it. And 16% of that reduction is going to be based on consumer behaviour. So consumer behaviour is the products and services that people buy and consume and use. That is all going to change over the next 8 years, hopefully far more quicker than we can anticipate. And that is why we, as marketeers and as advertising and media agencies, need to stand up and be counted and be ready for that change.
Ryan?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think it's this thing of, actually, as an industry, we actually have a pretty strong record on collaboration when the chips are down. That can be things like IAB ad sizes, vast formats, all the kind of boring stuff of there, but actually that underpins a lot of the tech infrastructure today for digital ads, especially. We can actually be quite good at collaborating when we need to. I think Laura's absolutely right. It's about finding ways in which we can do that while still being able to keep the lights on. I think the other part of it as well is understanding the actual scope of the problem. Like internet carbon, and of course advertising is just one part of that, but it's about sort of 4%. That's more than the global airline industry, and it's expected to double in the next couple of years.
That's massive, and I'm not sure that everyone in the room would even understand that. I mean, certainly I didn't before I spoke with you. I had an inkling, but I didn't, hearing that stat is actually very alarming.
Yeah.
A bigger carbon footprint than the airline industry.
Yeah.
It's a big responsibility, right?
That's it. I think there's this assumption that, because it's online, that doesn't incur any energy usage, that's all good and that's all fine. Actually, it's quite a scary number, and that's not a number that any one company, any one person is going to get down on their own. This isn't really something that we should be competing on. It's something we should be collaborating on. It's an all boats rise situation.
How do you find, as well, though, when you're working with your clients, how do you find sort of the education piece there? Are you finding that lots of people are very willing to make changes? Are they already quite aware, or a bit similar to, Sophie's perspective, people still just aren't necessarily grasping it, or they're motivated by other, by other KPIs, they're driven by other metrics to make them be less concerned about this and more concerned about something else?
Yeah, I think we're fortunate that we work with quite a broad range of clients. We have some who are very motivated on this subject and really care about it. There are those who are perhaps a little bit less motivated, but will care more when you start talking about the commercial benefit.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that's what makes it really important, is knowing who you're talking to. You have the one side, which is, this is important to me because I really care about the planet. And then this other side of, this is important to me because, well, it's great that it helps the planet, but it's also really cool that this is going to do something for my bottom line at the same time. So I think it is that sort of understanding of, who are we talking to? How can we get everyone bought in? And realistically, we have to be mindful when we're talking about things like net zero and everything. Actually, it can feel quite exclusionary at times. We've got to find ways in which we can bring everybody in. How can we align sustainability to what actually motivates and interests people? Because we all have different drivers.
Irfan, what's your point of view?
Yeah, I'll just build on the motivation point. It's about creating incentives, as horrible as that sounds, but the reality is every group within the ecosystem needs an incentive. On the sales side, publishers need a yield. Dr. Boris talks about the open web and about cookie deprecation and fallout in publisher yield. Well, this is an opportunity actually for publishers to earn more by delivering probably fewer, cleaner inventory, and I for one would certainly promote investing more or into that, as I mentioned earlier, and we're basically pointing our algorithms towards bidding algorithms towards that sub-segment inventory, so that could help. On the client side, the incentive is showing them that outcomes can be driven with investment in sustainability. And having these forums, having awards, like going to an awards do, and how many sustainability awards are there? So
in advertising, probably not many.
Yeah.
Okay. Sophie, like I said, you live and breathe it. How can we be, putting pressure on the rest of the industry, and where to care more? And where do we start?
So I think it's simplifying. It's such a complex topic. It's so difficult to know where to start, whether you should be changing your messaging and driving different behaviours with consumers, or whether you should be changing what ads you're buying or which agencies you're working with and how your supply chain works. I think if we simplified everything for marketeers, it would be much easier for them to simplify everything for consumers. And then I think we have to simplify measurement and governance so that we are clear exactly on what impact we are having and who's making claims about impact and how we can verify it.
Could you say a little bit more about the measurement piece? What, from your perspective, I know, Laura, when we chatted, you mentioned something about measurement as well. Ryan, you might have mentioned it. What should organisations be using to measure or understand where they're currently at with respect to their carbon output, etc.?
Laura could answer better than I could if it's across an entire business. I think if it's specifically on your marketing plans and specifically on digital media, then I think the agencies coming in, and in fact I did a quick WhatsApp poll on a CMO group this morning as whether agencies had approached clients and said, can we talk to you about the carbon footprint of your media plan? And I got a flat 0 from everybody. Essence did recently for us. So I think that would be a good place to start.
I think at the moment the challenge is lots of calculators are springing up, and the intention is really positive because people recognise we need to measure. But fundamentally, what we need to change is we need one consistent measurement tool that's been agreed, but we also need every holding group and every meat publisher and every ad tech provider to sign up to science-based targets, so net zero commitments, because only when you do that will you understand what you need to change operationally, so your scope 1 and scope 2, to use jargon, but then also your influence and what you need to change within your advertising community and how you operate. But for that consistency point, and again, back to people, consumers don't know it, but they are fast learning about it. And we that consistency is science-based targets with a net zero commitment would be my urge to every marketer, every ad tech owner here, every publisher here, and work back from that.
Do we have the infrastructure in place, to measure all of that, to have a sort of unified understanding of that?
So, again, no, not at the moment. But I would say the IPA calculator was a sort of call to the industry to use a consistent tool. And the next version of that is coming out is a lot more robust and is going to be open source again. So it can be collaborative with everybody in the industry. Because we need, a bit like TGI, we need a consistent tool that everyone knows that they're comparing exactly the same data metrics, that suppliers are being asked to supply the same data metrics, and then we can turn our focus into reduction, because that's what we need to do. So we will get there, and I think we'll get there in the next sort of 8 to 12 months. So it's just about making sure that we don't have 100 different calculators popping up within the advertising industry and competing to be the calculator of the industry. We just need one consistent one that we can all galvanise around.
Ryan, any more words on measurement?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that is also the sort of real kind of question of credibility, that if we have 100 different calculators with 100 different answers, well, which one can we trust? You can guarantee it'll be whichever number says the lowest. So we actually have a duty to be a little bit kind of bipartisan and for to actually kind of work as a collective to make sure that whatever that number is right and it's agreed upon and becomes sort of the shared framework for going forwards.
Yeah.
We can't fudge this.
Yeah.
We can't fudge it. There's too much at stake. We want to live in a world that's harmonious and, that we can breathe the air that we want to.
On a planet that's still here.
On a planet, but also, with, temperatures that don't mean that people that walk out in the global south, healthy people will die within 6 hours. We not to sound doomsday, I don't want to go all Jennifer Lawrence, like, we're all going to die. But,
taking us down a dark hole here.
No. But the opportunity is such a better society for all, like a thriving society for all, where we're connected with nature, where we have a healthy work-life balance. There's just so much positivity if we make the changes we make.
We're running out of time, but I am going to finish up with asking everybody, okay, we're at ATS London 12 months on from now. I think we've all agreed that environmental sustainability can't be just a work stream, it can't be an add-on. How would you like to see it integrated in an event like this? What does it look like in 12 months from now? Sophie, I'm going to start with you. Sorry.
I guess it's kind of end to end. Like, I'd actually be interested in what the carbon footprint of ATS is. And do you publish that?
No, we don't. It's a good
And
point.
we hold events and we don't publish ours either. And actually, I don't know if I could tell you exactly what our impact is on those. So I think everything about it, for me, it's not an add-on. It would be an ingredient to every single thing that we're doing. So I'd like to think that it was a part of the conversation in everything. It's not one of the panels. It's a topic that comes up in every panel because it's an ingredient to what everybody's doing. And I'd like to think that we had more people saying they knew what they were doing and they had a plan. And then the year after, I'd like that plan to be bringing the timeframes forward, right? If we're aiming for 2035 and we think we can hit it, then let's now aim for 2030 and let's be more aggressive. I'd like to have a plan for my own media plans and know that we were reducing our impact. And I'd like to think that there was more conversation amongst marketeers about what's the calculator. If you said what's the calculator, you might get no recommendations or you might get 100, but actually it would be great to be in a place where we did have an industry standard and people did kind of know where to start.
Yep. Right, exchange-wide team, we've got to get the carbon footprint up for ATS next year. But they're all really, good and helpful suggestions. Irfan?
I think it'd be great to get brands coming up here and presenting use cases and showing some success stories, because we've talked a lot today about things we should be doing and things we should be testing, but in 12 months' time we should really have in our industry a whole host of success stories that go across the wide spectrum of digital ecosystem and to inspire others from that.
Yep. Ryan?
Yeah, I think I'd like to see conversations move from being about concept to actual actions. There are dozens of things that you can do today that will have actual immediate impacts. That could be things like sending one less image in an email. The contrast between a text email is 4 grams of carbon, you put one image in, it's 50, so it's 12.5 times more. It's all these little things. There's lots of small, incremental, really easy things that you can do that we just don't really get a chance to talk about. So I'd love to see more kind of actions and insights.
I think on the retail media panel yesterday, it was, not with respect to environmental sustainability, but I'm pretty sure Gemma Spence spoke about the amount of optimizations that were required for various campaigns, and it sounded to me like that was a lot of carbon. I mean, she was just talking about the workload associated with it, but yeah, perhaps being able to talk about that more openly would be interesting. Laura?
I think building on Sophie's point, it's not that sustainability would be a panel. I think it would be that every conversation that was around innovation, about effectiveness, efficiency, all were born from the principles of sustainability. And sustainability, we're talking about environmental sustainability, but sustainability as its definition is about social and environmental issues. So making sure that, it would be brilliant to not have sustainable panels, but everything to be talking about sustainability, not even talking about it being embedded in the topics.
Integrated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I meant.
I knew what you meant. Thank you very much. I think that was excellent conversation. Delighted that you were able to join us here on stage, like I said, for the first opportunity to have this conversation. I completely agree with everything you've said. You've given us a number of challenges that we can look towards meeting for next year. So please, round of applause for my panellists. Thanks.